Well, France 24's Kethevane Gorjestani has also been keeping an eye on all of the developments out of New York. She joins me on set. Kethevane, let's start with Emmanuel Macron's speech. Again, now France officially recognizing a Palestinian state. Is this the diplomatic victory that France is hoping it'll be?
Well, look, it's clearly a diplomatic victory if you think about the sort of leadership of France on the world stage. Think about this. Look back a year or so ago and think, would we have expected about 10 countries to come to this UN General Assembly and recognize the state of Palestine? Probably not. And yes, Canada, the UK, Australia, they were the first in the timeline because they did it on a Sunday, but they probably would not have done it because it was without Emmanuel Macron and his announcement. His announcement came back in the spring where he first mentioned the fact that France was looking to recognize a Palestinian statehood. And it was France's lobbying of some of its key allies that led to all of these countries actually following suit. There are now 3 G7 nations that recognize a Palestinian statehood. And even when you look at the discussions in Germany or Italy that are staunch Israeli allies, you see that their leaders are coming under quite a lot of pressure from their people to possibly go along the same route as France and the others. But there was a line in Emmanuel Macron's speech that really showed why this is not a full-fledged victory. He said, some will say it's too late, some will say it's too early. So some, like Germany, Italy, say it's too early. Others say it's too late in the sense of, does that help the goal of a two-state solution? Because when you look on the ground, the reality, it does look maybe like this is a little bit too late because you've seen, and Noga was talking about Israel's angry reaction, the threats, the diplomatic threats, that closing of the consulate, for example, or annexing the West Bank. Benjamin Netanyahu has made it clear, now he says it openly and repeatedly, a Palestinian state will not happen, and he is making sure of it. They are destroying what is left of Gaza, and they are talking about, at the minimum, more settlements in the West Bank. At the maximum, some ministers talking about outright annexation. And Israel continues to count on probably the only support that it wants or needs, which is, of course, the United States. The United States maybe hasn't done much since the 90s to push for a two-state solution, but it was a pillar of U.S. foreign diplomacy in the Middle East. Now with Donald Trump and especially his entourage of very staunch pro-Israel supporters, that two-state solution is no longer something that the Americans really repeat over and over again, and they seem to be always on the side of Benjamin Netanyahu, if not on the side of Israel outright.
And it's going to be really interesting to see what happens this afternoon when Donald Trump is due to speak at the UN General Assembly. I mean, do we think he's going to address this in any way?
Look, the United States, through the Trump administration, has made it very clear how they feel about what France and the others have done. Rubio called Macron's move reckless. You saw that spat between the French president and the U.S. ambassador to France, Charles Kushner, on that topic. But it is unlikely that Donald Trump will want to dwell too much on this question, not because he doesn't want to get into why he's not supporting it, but mostly because discussing the situation in the Middle East, especially between Israel and the now state of Palestine, according to these countries, will be highlighting the fact that he hasn't been able to get a ceasefire, hasn't been able to end this war, as he said. And it will also point to the fact that he hasn't been able to end another one of the wars that he claimed he would be able to end in the first day, which is, of course, Russia's war in Ukraine. What he will focus on, according to the White House, will be his foreign policy record in general. So expect possibly the line of "I ended 7 wars" to come up during that speech. But he will mostly tout the sort of peace through strength, this new way of doing foreign policy that he embodies. Also expect Donald Trump to slam the very body that he's going to be speaking in front of, the United Nations, and other globalist institutions, as Caroline Leavitt, the spokesperson, put it. Last week already, the U.S. president said about the UN, there are great hopes for it, but it's not being well run, to be honest. And if you look back to the second term, Donald Trump has already pulled the United States out of the World Health Organization, out of the UN Human Rights Council, and it is currently reviewing U.S. support for dozens of intergovernmental organizations. We know that Donald Trump doesn't like alliances, doesn't like international institutions. So we'll see how far he goes in slamming those institutions, or whether he keeps it a little bit general.
All right, Kethevane, thanks for that. We'll be checking back in with you throughout the day as we get set for that speech from Donald Trump that we'll be broadcasting live for you here on France 24 when it begins just before 4 p.m. Paris time. Kethevane Gorjestani, thank you so much.